this person, and I think it's safe to say this, all right? I think this person, you know, people say to us in listener questions, which we will get into some later, they say off and on, who do we think is like the what could have been? Like, who is the head of that list? Like, what could have been, you know, if with his career or something like that, or who we really would love to see come back to wrestling. And one of the guys at the top of our list, and like I said, I want to shout out Mary and everybody else that took notice that for years upon years upon years, this show and primarily Kevin Castle have sung the praise of Sean O'Haire. That he has always been a focal point of conversation on this show. And I can't tell people that are new listeners how many times we've had discussions about Sean O'Haire. So it was a really sad day in professional wrestling, especially for this show. And I know Kev probably a little bit more than me, that we found out last week that Sean O'Haire, real name Sean Haire, committed suicide. And is no longer with us. Passed away, and
43 years old.
43 years old. I mean, he's our age. And Jesus Christ, man, what a terrible, terrible story in wrestling. Mm-hmm. And
well, I mean,
what a sad story.
You know, with Sean O'Haire, obviously, I was a big fan of his, and you know, one of the only good things I thought that was coming out of that last latter-day WCW with the Natural Born Thrillers. I always thought he was kind of a standout guy. You know, there was the guy Reno, and he was nothing. Yeah. Mark Jindrak, you know, he had to go to Mexico to get famous. You know, and I just looked at that whole lot, and I just said, this guy O'Haire, you know, could be, he had the look, the size, 6'4", 275, just, you know, had a good look. And then when they gave him the mic, oh, this guy can talk too. And, you know, the devil's advocate gimmick, which, by the way, we all just call it that. It was never called anything like that, but that kind of took off where because, you know, he was trying to get people to do things that they normally wouldn't do, kind of a troublemaker. But the devil's advocate thing, which really caught on, that we coined that phrase a few years ago, it was never actually officially called that. They didn't really have a name for it, but that's kind of what it was. But that gimmick was fantastic. It only lasted a few months. To this day, I still watch those clips, you know, when the music comes out and he starts talking about, like, things that, you know, you should go for in life or things that you shouldn't be told what to do. I mean, it was a great gimmick, and I never understood, ever understood where they thought, scrap that or alter it and put him with Piper and make him the new Bob Orton. I didn't get that. I think that's what really derailed him. And then Piper got in trouble, and Piper became his mentor, and then Sean got punished for that. As we all know, WWE does that to guys when they buddy up with an old veteran. The veteran gets in trouble, and they take it out on the rookie. I never understood that. I always thought WWE is ridiculous with their stupidity, the way they do things like that. They did it to K-Quick, who was now Ron the Truth Killings, years ago when he was Road Dogg's buddy, and Road Dogg got punished, and K-Quick got demoted, and then he wound up, you know, probably for the best. But O'Haire's release was bizarre, and the whole killing of that Devil's Advocate gimmick was bizarre, just because he was teaming with Piper. You know, and Piper at that time, if you guys remember, was fat and looked horrible. Piper's paunch, Vince McMahon used to call it. Piper looked terrible back then. O'Haire was probably the only good thing about his gimmick back then. But they got a lot of props on SmackDown. If you guys remember, they were in the feud with the Guerreros, and then he was just gone after Piper's HBO thing got exposed. O'Haire got demoted, and then he was gone as quick as that. And one of those head-scratching moments. You're like, this guy was money. I didn't get it. Got arrested a few times down the road, as we reported, even on our shows over the years, Don Tony. He was, you know, got into trouble, got assault and battery, was assaulted himself. If you remember that time he got jumped in the bar.
Yeah.
He's been in trouble with the law, someone said, almost half a dozen times. I actually know somebody from a band from New Jersey who actually lived with Sean for a while, because Sean was working, I believe, on some construction job, and, you know, when you do some out-of-state construction, you wind up, you know, they get hotels for these guys and they stay together, some of these guys from out of state. And a guy, a friend of mine, was telling me about Sean. Said he was a pretty good guy. He just was kind of lost. He didn't know what to do with himself and was doing a series of things. He was a bodyguard. He was doing MMA, as you guys know. And I think he was just one of those lost souls. He did not, I think in 2002, 2003, 2004, he thought wrestling is my life. I'm going to be a star in this business. And I think when it was taken away from him, he didn't do the independent circuit and bounce back and reinvent himself. I think he always thought, and according to my friend who was telling me about him, that he was going to get brought back. And it never happened. He did the MMA thing. He probably lost more than he won. But he was a professional wrestler. He wasn't claiming to be, he wasn't trying to be the next Randy Couture. I think he was just trying to make a living, the dude. And then turned 40 a couple of years ago. From what I heard, the guy just, he was a real lost soul. It's a shame. If you remember, the same thing happened to that wrestler Steve Bradley, Don Tony, who was supposed to be the next big thing in wrestling.
Sure.
Got released and killed himself in his car.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these guys are wrestling is their lives, or wrestling. This is their path, and it's a sad thing. That kind of depression, not knowing where your next dollar or dime or your home is going to be. It's a scary thing, and you can't say, "Oh, I would never do that. It never happened to me." It happens to a lot of people, a lot fucking more famous. It's a shame. I knew it when I saw that he died, that he'd killed himself.
Yeah.
I didn't even hear how it happened. I just saw Sean O'Haire, rest in peace, from, I believe it was, what was that guy who was Marcus Bagwell's tag team partner in the American Males?
Oh, yeah, you're talking about Scotty Riggs.
Scotty Riggs broke the story. He was the one on Facebook. And since he posted it, I thought it was true, and then it just worked its way around the circuit. And then a couple other people wrote me and told me, "Oh, did you hear about it? Lords of what was the name? Lords of Pain? Is that website?
Lords of Pain.
The wrestling site.
Yeah. Yep.
They put it up there, and no one had the cause of death. I didn't even have to wait. I knew it. I said, "This guy killed himself."
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Even the cause of death was strange because you hear the circumstances, and the one that comes to mind all the time.
And he was living at home. He was living with his parents.
He was living
so
at home.
He can just show you, guy, at 40, he was not in a good way financially. He was not in a good way mentally. A similar thing happened to a wrestler we talked about years ago in the 80s, Ed the Bull Ganter.
Yes.
Who was supposed to be a big deal in wrestling. He was going to be bigger than anything. And same thing. Wrestling, he got sick. Wrestling, he got released from Florida Championship. He had to go go away for a little while. He had a drug problem. Then steroids, though, wound up getting a kidney disease. Moved back in with his parents, too. A grown man who was in the NFL and everything, just didn't have a dime to his name. And same thing, just wind up just a shell of his former self and dying in his parents' home in his 30s. I mean, it's a very sad, it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah. And they also revealed this week that Sean O'Haire was in WWE paid sponsored rehab 6 times over the last 6 years.
Yeah, that's the guy I'm talking about. I don't want to reveal his name because he just wanted to be privacy. But he was telling me the same thing that he was definitely battling big time. I mean, he was almost in a Scott Hall-like way breaking records of going into rehab.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and this is why, you didn't hear too much about it because he wasn't a household name. He wasn't a Scott Hall. He was not he wasn't even an X-Pac when you really think about it. But, he had a nice little career. I'd say in like a 6-year run, I wouldn't call him a flash in the pan because he was around longer than that. But like I said, sometimes things just don't work out. It's really sad. And it reminds me of Steve Bradley because Steve Bradley didn't even get a chance to be a Sean O'Haire. Yeah. He never even made TV for the WWE. He broke if you remember, Don Tony, he was in developmental for 8 years.
Yeah, sure.
And Steve Bradley was the next Rob Van Dam. If you guys look him up, Steve Bradley, Superbad, they called him. Before even the movie came out, his nickname was Superbad. And he was the next Rob Van Dam, the next Kurt Hennig. And he got released, and he opened up a wrestling school. People thought he was getting back on track. And he died alone in his car in a parking lot. So it's just, like I said, wrestling, I don't blame wrestling, but I think when you have no option B, and this is what people get crazy notions and they do things to themselves. And it's sick how many people have died this year, by the way.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I tell you, as far as just to sum this up, we're not saying that the guy was going to be a major superstar.
No,
but
I never
that
said
guy,
that, but he would have been. Why couldn't he have had a Tito Santana-like career? Why?
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying.
Why couldn't he have had a Jack Swagger run?
Sure,
Jack Swagger's here 8 years now.
He had a physical presence about him. He had a look about him, and he had decent mic abilities. And talk about a character that was created that you just looked at it and said, "This is fucking great." Yeah, and.
You remember even in the back, he would just appear out of nowhere in the suit standing behind somebody. It was kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And it just, and he was an imposing figure, a big guy. You know, and I know girls who thought he was a good-looking guy. So he had that girls liked him appeal. Guys thought he was cool. He wasn't too much of a pretty boy where guys would be like, I'm not rooting for this guy. He had that kind of coolness to him. He had the thing going. I thought, like I said, walking around in the back in the suit, starting trouble and putting ideas in people's head to go do things that are going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
It was an interesting gimmick. I never seen anybody do that gimmick before. Sure. I don't know who in the back said, no, let's make him Piper's bodyguard and just scrap that whole thing.
The only thing I could
scratch your head.
The only thing I could think
of who did that. They ruined this guy's career.
Well, that's the only thing that we don't know, because we might find out later that that the problems, he might have had a lot of problems behind the scenes way back when.
He might have. But if you remember, people were saying that Sean, even guys like Keller and stuff were reporting years ago, Sean seemed to be a victim of associated with Piper.
Yeah.
Like people were actually saying that Piper screwed up this guy's career. I mean, I even see people to this day post, "Oh, Sean O'Haire, the guy that Piper fucked him over." You even hear people still say that. It actually made its way around the loop. It's not necessarily Piper's fault, but being associated with him when Piper went to town on that HBO interview, Sean was doomed at that point. And it's not fair, and it's bizarre that you take. It's true. You should just base on who did what and take it out on them. Don't take it out on somebody else. I mean, but WWE does that bullshit. You guys know that this has gone on for years with this company. It's a fact. Yeah. WWE is a vindictive company, and I don't know why they do that or what gets accomplished by doing stuff like that.
Yeah, it's true. So, well, Sean O'Haire, rest in peace. And
rest in peace, Sean O'Haire.
Talk about a guy.
Someone had posted a picture. I don't know who it was. And like I said, I'm not coming down on the guy who did it, because they're like, oh, look at Sean O'Haire look like a year ago, because Sean had lost his physique and he didn't look too good. Well, not for nothing. The guy was down and out in his luck. What was he supposed? He looked great for a long time and tried to get a fucking job, and he probably just gave up on himself. I mean, I didn't find any solace in that picture. Like, oh, that's Sean killed himself because he gained weight and he didn't have the muscle tone that he used to have anymore. It's like he's in his 40s now, and the guy's been for 8 years trying to get a job back in wrestling. What do you want from the fucking dude?
I wonder why TNA never pursued this guy at all.
Maybe the drug problems. Maybe, like I said,
that didn't stop them with other people.
People reveal a lot of things, but I never heard anybody bash Sean O'Haire on a shoot interview.
No.
I watch all the shoot interviews, you guys know, and I'm pretty, I pay attention to all these kind of details. I've never heard anybody trash talk him. Medusa wrote something nice about Sean on her Facebook page. She knew him very well, being in WCW with him during those last years. I never heard anybody trash Sean, and even my friend Scott, who lived with him for a little bit, no one said anything bad about him. I just think he was a trouble guy, but I don't think he was a bad guy.
Yeah.